Hello everyone, welcome to another Magic Survival video. We're going to take a look at the merchant in the depth level a bit more in details. The merchant is a new mechanic introduced in a recent patch of Magic Survival, which appears throughout a run at specific times. Once made contact with, it opens a shop with a different variety of 8 random artifacts, which may be common, rare, epic and special. The legendary artifacts can only be obtained from the obelisks at the end of the boss waves, with the only exception being, of course, the special artifact Golden Roulette. The resource used to purchase the items from the merchant are blue orbs, which are displayed at the top left of the game screen representing how much you currently have. They are not saved between runs, so you always begin at 0 when starting a new run. They are exclusively obtained by picking up blue, orange or purple mana orbs from the ground, and strangely, the world's tree fruit does not give any blue orbs. The blue mana orb always gives 1 blue orb, the orange mana orb gives 1 blue orb as well, and the purple mana orb gives 5 blue orbs. However, after interacting with the second merchant at minute 9, it starts giving 6 blue orbs instead. However, I am putting a disclaimer here for obtaining blue orbs that I will talk about in the disclaimer section later in the video. The mana acquisition stat does not affect the amount of currency obtained from picking up mana orbs in any way. However, there are still some ways to increase your yield of blue orbs. One such way is with the special level of passive Mana Factory, which increases the passive rate at which mana orbs are spawned on the ground by 20%. And another way is with the artifact Exorcism, which increases mana orbs generated from killing enemies by 20%. The Mimic artifact also yields extra blue orbs. It generates 10 random items on the ground after opening a chest, of which 8 at least are usually mana orbs. Also, the special artifact Philosopher's Stone, which when obtained in any way generates 30 purple mana orbs on the ground, which is 150 or 180 blue orbs depending on when obtained. The merchant usually spawns at a random location near the edge of your screen, or that distance away from your character if it is in the middle. Sometimes it spawns off screen, but just over the edge. There is an icon that appears on screen if the merchant is off screen, showing you the location and how much time you have left until it disappears, which is also represented by a bar below the merchant when he is on screen. The merchant's spawn time is linked to the boss waves across all levels. That's why I mentioned earlier and in the video title that my focus is on the depths level, since I mainly play it. The difference in merchant behavior on other levels is minimal, but I'll touch on that later. The first boss wave that spawns on the depths level is at 2 minutes and 30 seconds in-game time, where the timer freezes until the wave is completed, the obelisk is interacted with, and the item picked from it, which resumes the timer on the run. Then the same reoccurs 2.5 minutes later at minute 5 exactly, and they continue as such every 2.5 minutes until the end of the run. The merchant spawns 49 in-game seconds before every second boss wave, meaning the first one spawns at 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and unless interacted with, the merchant stays exactly up to 1 second when the boss wave appears after it, which makes it extremely easy to track with the in-game run timer at the top of the screen, as you know exactly when it will appear and disappear. It is best to interact with the merchant as late as possible before it disappears, but more on that later. The merchant respawns every 2 boss waves, appearing just before the 4th boss wave at 9 minutes and 11 seconds. They remain active until the 1st second of the next boss wave unless interacted with. The cycle repeats every 2 boss waves with the same spawn and despawn timings, which are as follows. The first merchant spawns at 4 minutes and 11 seconds and despawns just as the boss wave appears at 5 minutes. The second merchant spawns at 9 minutes and 11 seconds and despawns just as the boss wave appears at 10 minutes. and so forth. This continues until the run is over, or at least I think so, since I have not gone further into the level as progression to confirm the 10th merchant and further. But I see no reason that they should not spawn after the 9th. You can open a merchant only once, and once closed via the X button at the top right, the merchant disappears and cannot be interacted with again until the next one appears. In order to open the merchant's shop, you need to get in close and touch him directly with your character. Man, that sounds weird. At which point the game pauses and opens a new menu screen, which is similar to the pause of level ups, obelisks and chests. The merchant offers 8 artifacts randomized, either common, rare, epic and special. It is possible that a merchant may not have any of said one rarity, or only have one rarity artifacts and anything in between. In theory, it should be possible to get a merchant with only special artifacts, although I presume the chances of that happening is so close to zero that may take infinite amount of tries to happen. At most I have gotten merchants with 4 special artifacts up to this point. It is somewhat often that the merchant is missing a specific rarity completely, and on rare occasions missing 2 rarities entirely. The artifacts offered by the merchant follow the same principle as other sources of providing artifacts. You can't get duplicate artifacts or buy an artifact you already own. Also, an artifact that has already been skipped in an earlier merchant, chest or obelisk may still appear in the new merchant, same as it is with chests and obelisks. The pricing for each artifact is randomized between set amount for each rarity. In the first merchant you can see a ruby for 170 blue orbs, but in another run the same first merchant may offer the ruby for 210 blue orbs. Also putting a disclaimer here for later as well. The prices for the first merchant are as follows. The common artifacts are usually around 200-210, but they can go as low as 170 and as high as 240. The rare artifacts are usually around 250, but they can go as low as 210 and as high as 290. The epic artifacts are usually around 350, but they can go as low as 300 and as high as 420. The special artifacts are usually around 520, but can go as low as 450 and as high as 600. The prices increase with each merchant, but could not figure by how much exactly, mainly due to the randomization part. Based only on the tries I did and comparing the prices, I could not figure out the formula. And I was too lazy to look deeper into it, but it seems the increase is by 50% the base amount. Although the price difference with the second merchant can be negligible due to the randomization part, there is a noticeable increase at the third merchant's wares. And the fourth merchant's wares are at least more than double the prices of the first merchant. The sixth merchant's prices are at least more than triple the prices of the first, and the eighth merchant's prices are at least more than quadruple. Due to the overlapping gaps between the base cost of the common and rare artifacts, it is possible to see a rare artifact that is cheaper than a common one. There are 2 artifacts added in the game that are related to the merchant. The special artifact Bouquet, which reduces the merchant's prices by 25%, and Mana Fountain, which increases the Amplify attack stat by 1% for every 200 blue orbs you currently have, up to a maximum of 20% increase reached at 4000 orbs. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Mana Fountain. In my opinion, it is more of a curse than a boon, as it forces you not to use a huge amount of your blue orbs to keep the stacks high, or weigh the option of sacrificing Amplify attack to buy items. This is even more apparent in late game, where its price would be so high it will not yield any benefit. As such, I bought it only once from the merchant. Also, rarely if ever I pick it up from chests, as most other items are usually way more valuable compared to the cost of having Mana Fountain. On the other hand, The bouquet is the best item for blue orbs, as it increases their value a lot by making items in the shop 25% cheaper. To simplify it, if you are presented with the choice to buy it from the merchant, in order to get the price of the bouquet covered, you need to spend 3 times the amount of blue orbs it costs across the rest of the merchants. For example, if the bouquet costs 500 blue orbs, you need to spend another 1500 blue orbs at least to break even. It is usually easy to foresee if you will be able to spend 3 times the amount of the bouquet costs at any point in the game. Anything above the 3 time cost make it a net positive, gaining you blue orbs in the process, especially late game, where after the 30-minute mark special artifacts may cost over 2k blue orbs. It is worth to mention the test subject archaeologist that starts with the mimic artifact, as usually on all the runs I did with it, I got a lot more blue orbs than usual at the first merchant, usually around 200, and there was a run combined with the archaeologist class that I got over 1100 orbs by the time I got shopping at the first merchant. It is worth going for this usually, as if you get lucky, you may be able to buy 2 special artifacts from the first merchant. And this scales well into the second, third and fourth merchants, as arguably they are the most important ones, since the prices there are not yet extreme and you usually will be able to buy multiple artifacts. However, it is not without its downsides. It does start to fall off quickly after the 15th minute mark, and you need to search for the epic artifact you would have otherwise gotten with another test subject. Although a random rune you may get is still nice, and it can be a big help late game. There is no real benefit to skipping a merchant and not interacting with them at all. If left to disappear without interacting with them, the merchant will appear with the same inventory at the next mark but with the increased cost, so it is beneficial to check out every one of them. As previously mentioned, it's best to delay entering the shop when the merchant spawns. You can use this extra time to gather more orbs, as the next merchant will appear at the same scheduled time regardless if you open the current one early. This strategy allows you to maximize your orbs before purchasing at the current merchant, which is cheaper than the next one. Usually you can simply rotate around the merchant doing this, farming extra orbs, although you have plenty of time to go far as well. If you get a pickup range rune close to the merchant spawn time, pick it up at the latest time possible before the merchant disappears. But give it a couple of moments to magnet all of the orbs to you before that, as otherwise they will freeze midair and come to you after the merchant. This is extremely easy to do since we know the exact despawn timer. I usually cut it really close, interacting with the merchant just as the boss wave spawns. However, doing this for the first merchant usually nets me more than 100 blue orbs. That is why I always stall interacting with all of the merchants. Usually, there is more than enough space between you and the merchant when he spawns, and more often than not, the merchant spawned at the backside of my character. But be aware when the merchant will spawn, as I was not paying attention to the spawn time and ran into him a couple of times by accident right as he was spawning. This is easier to happen when you have high mobility. Sometimes you may get a merchant with undesirable items, and most people would assume to save the orbs for the next merchant, which is a valid option, as saving them would mean that you may be able to buy more artifacts at the next one. However, since the same rules apply for the merchant as for the chests and obelisks, meaning no owned artifacts can come up again, there is an argument for buying some less desirable items from the shop with some leftover orbs, to increase the quality of all other chests and merchants, since the item will no longer come up in future rewards. This I would recommend doing mid-game, meaning not do it in the first and second merchant, but all the rest up to the 6th merchant, usually depending on how much orbs I have accumulated, as late game a single special artifact purchase can bankrupt you. The pricing randomization makes it hard to pinpoint a perfect amount of blue orbs to have for each merchant. Obviously, the more you have, the better. However, there is a good amount to have at least for the first merchant. A minimum good amount is 600 blue orbs for the first merchant, as this guarantees that you will be able to buy a special artifact if a good one is provided and its price is high roll. This is where the stall tactic really shines, as you can get more than 100 extra orbs for the first merchant. Of course, this mainly depends on your clear and movement speed. Pickup range is great, since the new crit artifact got introduced, giving you crit for pickup range stat. However, the king of gathering orbs, especially early game, is still movement speed. Even when I experimented with Black Mage test subject, who starts with Exorcism, I noticeably got more orbs when I had gotten early movement speed level ups or artifacts. Exorcism still helps if chosen to start with. Usually I got around 80 to 100 more blue orbs for the first merchant with it, but it varies greatly as it depends on many factors, especially enemy clear speed, as it directly increases mana orbs from kills. The strength of Mana Factory and Exorcism are most strongly felt mid to late game, as the percentile increase does not pair well with the small yield in the beginning. However, the Mimic is an excellent early game blue orbs item as it gives flat amount per chest. Obelisks are also counted as being chests, so they drop the 10 extra random items as well. The disclaimers I mentioned earlier are in regards to things I could not confirm with 100% certainty in testing and a couple of other things still related. So instead I added them in this separate section, but maybe related to the earlier mentioned parts. One of the main reasons I made them as a disclaimer was because during one of my runs, one of the giant balls that drops 5 purple mana orbs once taken care of seemingly dropped only 3. Which baffled me, but I started paying close attention to my blue orbs and noticed I still got blue orbs as if I had picked up 5 purple mana orbs. Seemingly after the third merchant at minute 14, the yield of the orange mana orbs increases by giving you 2 blue orbs every 4 to 5 orange mana orbs. The same is for the purple mana orbs after the fourth merchant at minute 19, where they give 7 blue orbs instead of 6 every 4 to 5 purple mana orbs. However, I cannot confirm if this is the case with 100% certainty due to the previous mentioned point, and the clusterfuck on screen mid to late game makes it hard to discern anything. This also means that I will have to include Singularity Artifact as an honorable mention of blue orbs increase, as it turns all blue mana orbs to orange ones, technically making it increase if the previous mention is correct. The item range prices for the merchant are based on the items that I have gotten in my testing and general runs. However, I may have not gotten the most expensive possible or cheapest possible for some or all of the rarities of artifacts, as the pool I worked with to take the info from is a bit more than 100 merchants for the first one, making it definitely not enough to derive exacts from. Maybe if it were 1000 or 10,000 merchants, then maybe yes, but I am in no position to do that. I was thinking of providing a percent chance for each rarity to come up in the shop. However, due to my previous point, I decided to include it here in the disclaimer section, as other people may have gotten different results in their experience, and what I got as a bottom line for each rarity percent chance to appear may be different than what in reality is set in the game by the developers. What I got is based on a bit more than 200 merchants from all points in the run, and it is as follows. The most consistent for me was the special artifacts, with a bit over 11% chance to come up, averaging almost 1 per merchant. Strangely, common rarity was only with 29% chance to appear, on average being a bit more than 2 common artifacts per merchant. Rare artifacts were surprisingly scarce compared to the common and epics coming at 25%, averaging about 2 rare artifacts per merchant. And the most surprising of all are the epics, which came at a whopping 35%, averaging close to 3 epic artifacts per merchant. Another thing to note is that you start the run on the depths level with the space-time circuit artifact, which makes the game run 24% faster. Thus the time counter in-game does not reflect real-world minutes and seconds. 300 seconds, which is 5 minutes exactly in-game timer passing, is equivalent of 228 seconds, which is exactly 3 minutes and 48 seconds in real time. That of course excludes the pauses in-game for the boss levels, level ups, chests and merchants. One last thing to mention is the merchant on the other levels. As the boss waves spawn at different times, so does the merchant, but again the same mechanics are applicable there. It first spawns before the second boss wave and repeats every 2 boss waves after. There are 2 major differences. One is the spawn time. The merchant spawns at the beginning of the minute instead of 11th second, and this spawns about 10 seconds before the boss wave appears. The other difference is that with the increased time between the boss waves, more time in-game has to pass in order to get the same amount of merchants in comparison to the depths level. For example, the 4th merchant on the depths level is at the 19 minute and 11 second mark, but on the other levels the 4th merchant will be at the 23 minute mark. Personally, I enjoyed the update a lot. It improved the gameplay without convoluting it more. I always thought that there was little to do with the mana drops in game. They were a bit bland, simply there for increasing your level and no other interaction. But this is an excellent addition, incentivizing you to focus on gathering them more than usual and making it worth even going for pickup range upgrades. With the new artifact that gives you crit based on your pickup range, it increases in value, which is usually at the bottom of my priority list. Thank you so much for watching. The video became a lot longer than I originally anticipated it would. However, I hope that this gave you some insight to the merchant. If you have any questions, general tips, ideas, or just want to say something, mention it in the comments. I would love to hear about your experience and impression with the merchant. Bye!